Do you have a bunch of jumbo commander cards clogging up your value chest? Oh, like millions of Americans, I too suffer from this problem. However, in this tutorial, I will show you how to take a relatively worthless and ugly commander jumbo card and turn it into this. Use the star wipe. No, not that. That's the pixel garbage. Stop it. Enough. Oh God. Okay. Okay. You go menu. Yeah, that one. That one. Yes, that. Okay. Into this. Here are all the tools you're gonna need. A jumbo commander card. Preferably a lot of them. This is a paper cutter. If you don't have this, a box cutter or an X-Acto knife and a straight edge will work just as well. However, if you do have this, you're still gonna need a straight edge and an X-Acto knife for cleanup. Stop, stop, other hand, stop! A pencil or a charcoal pencil, because it'll be easier to clean off the card. Q-tips. I've never used these things for my ears ever. I only ever use them for crafts. Masking tape, preferably this beautiful froggy tape or the good quality blue tape. Don't cheap out on masking tape. Buy good quality masking tape. Cheap masking tape will rip the finish off cards and it'll make it ugly and broken and dumb. But just spend the extra $2. This stuff is called super tacky glue. You can get it at Michael's for, I think, $1. You'll need a brush that you hate because you're going to use it to spread glue, making it practically useless. A little thing of water and a napkin. You'll need some heavy shit, like 2 giant binders filled with cards that are going to weigh down and make the glue be glue. And some cards that you don't care about. You also need a work surface that you're okay scratching up. In my case, it's this old table that I lost the legs to. This hence all the scratches. Probably should buff that out with knives. So I'm going to do this with Mael the Anima. However, you can use basically any jumbo promo you want. For Planeswalkers, the process is a little bit different, and I really haven't found a way to perfectly do it with Planeswalkers just yet. I did make a Windgrace, but I want to see if I could do it differently. Planeswalkers are a little bit different when it comes to cutting them down to this size, because a lot of Planeswalkers still have artwork in the title. Like if you look at a Lord of Windgrace Planeswalker, you'll notice that his head comes above the title, so it's kind of tricky to do it like that. Another thing you have to understand with these jumbo cards is that you will be losing some of the artwork. Again, I bring in the Derevi. The top portion and the bottom portion of the card, the artwork is a little bit more obscured, so you're going to lose some art. That does come into play with the measuring as well, so this is why I'm choosing Maya, because I don't feel like losing that much of the bottom. Like about, I'm going to say, 1/4 of an inch from the bottom and 1/4 inch from the top. It won't really destroy the artwork because the main focus is her face. So as long as we still have her face and the sides, you get a good amount. If you're using a work surface like mine that I use for cutting a lot of shit, I do suggest getting another piece of paper. This is watercolor. Bristol works just as well, or poster board to put the card on as you're doing this so you don't damage the back. This backing I'm not too worried about because we're going to be cutting and getting it covered in glue and all that fun. But I do use a back card like this whenever I make these things, just to kind of make it look consistent and like a normal Magic card. So you don't want to get this scratched up. You want this to be nice and pretty. All right, so we're going to leave that light on. Hopefully the glare won't be too bad. Okay, so I'm going to be using a paper cutter for the bigger portions. However, if you don't have a paper cutter, which I'm sure a lot of people don't because what normal person has a paper cutter? I mean, you know what I mean. You can also do this. Now, I have fairly shaky hands. I don't know how I managed to paint. So what I do is I take a straight edge like this. This is a very old straight edge. The cork bottom that usually holds it into place has rubbed off over the years. So it's kind of ugh. So what I do is I actually tape the straight edge down. So cutting the artwork out is actually the easy part, and I can show you a neat little trick. What you do is you take a Magic card and you want to put it over the artwork and the creature type, so legendary creature, elf shaman, because you want to keep the title. We're going to be putting the title on top. Getting some tape, just cutting 2 small pieces out. You don't want to waste too much tape. Just putting it on the sides like this, covering over the artwork, and boom, you got a good portion of the card ready to go. Cutting made easy. So, like I said, I have slightly shaky hands, and sometimes when I'm putting a lot of pressure while cutting, the ruler tends to move. So if you tape down the ruler, you kind of make yourself a pseudo paper cutter. And we're just going to line that title up along the edges of the card. What you can do, you can get another Magic card just to kind of push against it like this until it's nice and lined up. And honestly, you probably should be using an X-Acto knife. I don't have an X-Acto knife, I have a box cutter, but it's sharp and it'll do the trick. Cut along that, and boom. You got the title, and you definitely want to hold on to that because we're going to need it. Also, don't be afraid if you have a little raised edge like that. We can clean all that up at the end. If you do have a paper cutter like me, it's easy. You just take your paper cutter. This is a cool one because it has a little string right here. I'll zoom in on that. The little string that you can use to line up with the edge. And I actually won't use the viewfinder completely because I still need to see. And once you have that lined up to the edge, you just take it and boom. Nice and simple. Keep this portion too. We're going to be cutting off this section because that'll be our bottom. And we're just going to take this off. Take off the froggy tape. And boom. We have our standard sized card. Now, if you wanted, you could just use this. You sleeve it up, or if you want, you could tape it to the back like this. And boom, you have a cool looking My El the Anima. However, we're going to get a little more complicated. We're going to put stuff on her. So the title will be going up here, like so. And we got to cut this out, so I'll show you how to do that right now. Now, if you wanted to get fancy, what you could do is actually cut along the black side of the edges, keep this section, and then have it lined up to the edges so it hits the title as well, so you have a nice little border. However, I don't want to do that because gluing that is a pain in the ass and requires a much steadier hand than mine. So we're going to take our little ghetto tape measure again. We're going to paste that to the bottom, and we're going to line up with the part right here. Now, this, if it's like wonky, it's fine because we're going to end up cutting in here and cleaning it up a bit, so you don't have to worry too much about that. You just want to get the power and toughness cut nice and evenly. So we'll get that lined up, and one swipe, and boom. There you go. Nice and neat. And we'll clean that up a bit too because we want it to be nice and even. I like taping things to the table just because it makes it a lot easier when cutting. You know, sometimes if you put too much pressure on something, it can move a bit, and then you end up with a wonky line. So I don't need a straight edge for this because we're just going to press down and pull, and we're going to make a nice cut along there. Same with here. This one we're going to curve a little bit like that, and then we'll take our straight edge, just line that up right there. We'll put it over. We'll put the tape over the part that we don't want to cut. There we go. As we're pulling the knife back, we know when to stop. So hold it tight because this part's a little tricky. And stop. Now we pick this up and it just falls right off. And bazinga. I hope I never say that again. You have the power and toughness and the artist's name too. Okay, so what we're left with after all that cutting is the artwork, the power and toughness border, and the title. And if we put that together, it looks like that. But now we need the glue. So this part is a little tricky, and there's a couple options you can use when gluing. Now what I like to do, as you see, I like to tape things down just because it gives me more control. I'm going to take the watercolor board, and I'm going to tape it down to the table so it doesn't move. Just tape that down so it doesn't move around too much. I'm actually also going to take a card, the backing card that we're going to use, and I'm going to tape that to this paper as well. All right, tape that to the back. Tape that to the bottom. And there we go, nice and flat. And we're just going to draw lines. This will be our grid. Now you don't technically need to use a charcoal pencil. Actually, use a regular pencil. I don't know why I'm using a charcoal pencil. It just happened to be within reach. And you have a sort of a guideline. All right, so we know that this is going to be sitting on top there, and we want to just get it kind of within the guidelines. So now we need our glue. Now I use super tacky glue. For crafts and hobbies. Got this at Michael's. Costs, I think, $1. It's really good. I actually use this to bond leather to page signatures to make a kind of a junky leather journal of sorts for a friend of mine. And it works really well. It's very sturdy, it's weather resistant, and it's cheap, cheap, cheap. Nicole, quality value. The only problem is I'm running out, so I'm going to have to shake a lot, guys. I'm just going to pour some glue right here. Okay, where's my brush? There's my brush. We're going to take a brush that you probably won't be using anymore. This one has more than outlived its usefulness, and we're just going to brush the glue on. Don't be afraid to get a lot on there. You want the corners, the edges, every edge you want coated. Alright, and take our Maille and just go along the grid lines like that. Take your other cards too and just kind of feel along the edge like that and push. Just kind of get it nice and centered. Okay, if it's not perfect, we're going to be cutting off more parts at the end, so during cleanup, so not a big deal if it's not completely centered. Actually, what we can do is take a straight edge, put it along this side, and just push down. You don't want to slide off because it's going to move the card around. Okay. Now, we're just going to leave it alone for about 5 minutes while it gets just hard enough so it'll stay while we're putting on the other pieces. Alright, so I've had it sitting for about 5 minutes. The glue is not dry, but that's actually fine because we still want to move it around. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it off the paper, if I can get under it, because we want to hold it a bit. Carefully take that off. And we want to realign if we need to. So if you see there's like a little raised edge right here, that is perfectly fine. Again, cleaning up will get rid of most of these tiny edges as well as making the corners nice and round. And the reason we want to take it off the paper, you don't actually have to do this if you don't want to. I do it like this because I'm more comfortable. You can glue it together while you're holding it. Just use your fingers to line up the edges and make sure that they're both glued together nice. I do it like this because that's just how I prefer to do it. So now we're going to glue the title and the power and toughness section, the border, I call it the frame, around it. And now your hands are going to get a little dirty. So if you don't like your hands being dirty, it's tough, get them dirty. All right, so we're going to take we're going to put the title on first. So we're going to take the title, and like the card, we're just going to get it nice and covered. Make sure you get all the edges as well, the corners, everything. All right, so now we're going to pick up the card, pick up the title, and we're just going to place it on like that. And use our fingers to just push it up and pull it to the side until it's completely lined up. And then we're going to take some glue. We're actually going to put some glue on the edges over here. Just kind of run our finger around the edges, push it down just a bit. All right, kind of just leave it alone for a little. And we're going to do the same to the bottom part. And just like the title, we're going to put it on the bottom and use our fingers to line it up. A little glue, just rub it along the sides just to fill in any gaps. It's still malleable. You notice it's very dirty. Again, that's fine. No need to worry about that. And there you go. That's what you're left after all the gluing. Now it's still wet, it's still malleable. What you want to do is you want to put it under some weights. In my case, I got 2 big ass binders. So we're just gonna put it on our table over here, which is really a bad idea. Probably should put it on paper. Don't want to get your table dirty. Just put on a piece of paper. Okay, and put some weights on it. And just leave it there. It's been a half an hour, and yes, I sanded this crappy fake wooden particle board thing. Mainly because I needed a smooth surface, so I'm aware it's ugly, but it's smooth. It's like a smooth thing. So this is our end result. Our Maille the Anima, and as you can tell, it's very dirty. So now we have to do the fun part. Clean it. So if I put it up to the light like this, you can actually see where all the glue from my fingers ended up. On the back, there's quite a bit too. So I have here a tissue, like paper thing, tissue. I suggest using this because they're soft. Do not use paper towels. Those are a little too abrasive, and they might actually end up rubbing off the foil on it. You also want to use these Q-tips. Q-tips are going to take off most of it. I would say they're going to take out like 85–90% of the glue, make it look nice. I actually am going to put this on the paper. I smoothed this out because when we cut it, I want to make sure it doesn't move around. You ready for the fun part? The cleaning. Alright, and after all that methodical cleaning, you end up with a fairly clean surface on both sides. From here, if you want to get off some of the smaller pieces, you just take the tissue. This is just on the face. Don't be afraid to push hard. That was funny. You want to get off all the little tiny glue pieces. Fairly clean. You'll notice the sides, there's some glue, but that's okay. We're going to cut, so that'll release most of the glue. Alright, so now we want to clean up the edges. As you can see, you got some overlap over here. Perfectly normal. And this is the biggest portion, so what we're going to do, same principle, take our straight edge, take some masking tape, just to hold the straight edge down to the table. So as you can see, I pretty much got just the extra overlap under the straight edge. Now you want to hold really tight and go slow. And as you're holding tight, it moved a bit. Like I said, you got to hold really, really tight to make sure nothing moves. This is a very, very delicate process. It's pretty good with this one. Don't see too much of an overlap except for this side. The other side's pretty smooth. That's mostly glue, which we're going to clean off in a little bit. So to get the glue off the edges, and in this case to kind of push this down, what you want to do is you want to take an X-Acto blade. Actually, in this case, a box cutter would be better. The front, you just got to be a lot more careful how you do it. And that's just going to take off the glue. It's caught on the sides. You don't want to press too hard because you don't want to damage the foil. You can do this too. That'll rub off the glue, but just be careful. You don't want to get a paper cut. This was the cut side. No, this was the cut side. So yeah, this is still dirty. And finally, the corners. As you can see, there's some overlap in the corners. So we just want to get those nice and smooth. Those you actually can use scissors for. So we'll just get them nice and close. I'll zoom in. I'm actually using my phone to help me. Cut off that corner. Cut off that. That one. And that one. And there you go, folks. There's your Mael the Anima. Just as a normal, standard size playing card. And I do suggest putting this under the binders again, putting it under the weights just to make sure it dries nice and evenly. But now that it's cleaned up, as soon as it's dry, you can go ahead and use it. Before and after. You can see, it does take a little finagling to get it to look like that. A lot of precise cutting. But you kind of end up with a fairly cool thing. And this isn't perfect. It's still kind of dirty. It's still kind of damaged. But it's just a cool thing to do with jumbo promos. Like, I'm not great at cutting. I just showed you, like, my basic skills at cutting cards and trying to make them look halfway decent. If you're really good with cutting and you have way better equipment, like, you know, a ruler that has an actual bottom, then you'll probably get a lot better results than I did. I do suggest, though, being careful with the ones you choose. You definitely want to choose artworks where if you take a little off the top and a little off the bottom, you'll still end up with a really good card. Kind of want to avoid something like maybe Thraxmandar, where the top portion holds quite a bit of art. Especially Rubinia Soulsinger, where you don't want to cut her head off, so you probably have to get a lot more clever with how you use the space available on the bottom. And Planeswalkers especially, I'm still trying to figure out how to do Planeswalkers correctly. In this case, you have Estrid the Mask. You can see her face is covering up a portion of the title. So similar effect, you probably have to use portions of this that you're not going to be using to just raise it up a bit so you get both the bottom of this under here and the title in the same card. It's a little complicated, but it's a fun project if you know what you're doing when it comes to cutting and measuring and all that fun stuff. Hope you guys enjoyed. I wanted to thank the people on Twitter who requested that I make a tutorial on how I make these cut commander cards. Really hope you guys liked it. If you have any comments, questions, tips, opinions, cookie recipes that you want to give in the comments, go ahead. Really appreciate the recipes. You can give me some of those. And I will see you guys later in more videos. But until then, no, don't run with scissors.